Okay, this is Professor Robert Solis. What we're going to do is we're going to work on a logical and logical or calculator that will inevitably display a message such as true and true equals true, true or true equals true, or whatever the combination happens to be that's given by the user. So I create this graphical user interface. Let me just go to properties really fast to remind you that this right here is called a group box. I didn't give this group box a name, and I obtained the group box from this containers section over here. So in containers, I just simply took this group box, I dragged and dropped it over here because I want to place something into the group box. The things that I want to create or display into the group box, we call those radio buttons. So I placed two of these radio buttons over here. This one I give the text property true, this one I give the text property false. Notice that this has an initial value, it's selected. That's because the clicked, or the checked rather, property is set to true. Whereas for this one, false, the checked property is set to false. So I do this, make two of those by simply copying and pasting, create a submit button and a label. And so now what I want to do is to enter the code for this project. So I'll double click on the submit button, and that takes me into the code area. Here's what I would like for you to do. Press enter a couple of times from the top of the program, and I'm going to have you create some global variables. Sometimes people say these are modular variables. Now, in general, most programmers, probably most professors, will say try to stay away from global variables. That's in general true, but that doesn't mean that you cannot use them. Sometimes they can be very helpful. You just have to be careful because when something is global, that means that everyone has access to it. All of your functions have access to it. And that may be a good thing, like in this case. So just treat it with caution. What I'm going to do is I'm going to declare a variable called switch1state as Boolean, and I'm going to set that to true. Now, you've seen integers, you've seen doubles. Now this is the Boolean data type. The Boolean data type is something that is either true or false. That's all it has, one or the other value. You could think of true as 1, and you could think of false as 0, say for example. You could think of it as on or off, or yes or no. The idea is this only has one of two values. So what I want to do is I want to find out what is the state of my switch. Are you on or off, or true or false? Okay, so that's what this thing does. Let me go ahead and create another one of those variables called switch2state as Boolean, and again I'm going to set that equal to true. You may be wondering, why am I setting this equal to true? Well, since I said that both of these buttons are by default true, I had better be consistent and create a variable called switch2state also set to true. Now remember, this is not this. This is a radio button. This is a variable that represents the state of that radio button. Either it's going to be true or it's going to be false. Okay, so now what I want to do is, if the submit button is clicked, I want to perform some sort of an evaluation. But before I perform that evaluation, it depends on the state of those radio buttons. So let's go back to the design. Here we are in the design tab. So when this is checked, then that means that the switch is true. What I want you to do is hover your mouse pointer on top of true and double click it. So you double click it and it takes you to this code over here. So this code is saying if this radio button has changed its checked property, what do I want to do? So we're going to use the if statement. If RDB switch 1 true. If the checked property, see this guy over here? If the checked property is equal to true, then, now press enter. So this is doing this. It's checking the state of this, because you just clicked this. When you clicked it, it takes you over here to this procedure. You are now saying, hey, if your value for the checked property is true, in other words, it's selected, if that is the case, then I'm going to say that your switch one state is true. So we're changing the state of switch 1. All right. Let's do the same thing for the other buttons as well. So let's go back over here. I'm going to have you double click on this false button. So switch 1, let's say that the user clicks false. Let me double click. That takes me into this code area over here. So if RDB, that radio button, for switched 1 switch 1 false, right, because that's the one that we selected. This is switch 1 false. Let me just prove it to you. RDB switch 1 false, that's this one over here. If that's equal to true, then, so in other words, did somebody click this thing? Oh, sorry, I forgot to put dot checked. I'm considering the checked property. Did somebody click this and therefore checked it? If that's true, if that's the case, then my switch 1 state is false. All right, so that takes care of these two buttons. How about this one over here? Let me double click this one for switch number 2. Here's the code that I just typed. But now I double clicked, or I'm sorry, I clicked switch number 2. So I'm going to say if RDB, that radio button of the one that we just clicked, for switch 2, and it was the true radio button that I selected, dot checked is equal to true, then, so in other words, what I'm asking is, hey, did you click this guy right here? And did you change that? That's what this is saying. Is the checked property for that switch now true? Because if it is, then switch 2 state, which is that variable that I created up here, right? That switch 2 state, I'm going to change that to true. Finally, we have to deal with this button over here. What if the user selects switch 2, the false radio button? So I'll double click it. If radio button switch 2 false, this one right here. If the checked property is true, that is, someone clicked this and therefore checked it, if that's true, then my switch 2 state is false. Right? If I select false over here for switch 2, then my switch 2 state is now set to false. Those are two variables that I created up here, switch 2 state, switch 1 state. Now I'm going to change that over here. Save all. So what we've done is we've created two variables that are going to represent this group box and this group box. How are we going to represent the state of those group boxes? With these variables. These variables are global because they don't belong to any particular procedure. So I type in the code to change the state of switch 1 and for switch 2. Okay. So now what I want to do is if the user clicks the submit button, that's when I want to AND the state 1 and state 2 or the state 1 or state 2. So I'm going to go back over here and double click the submit button. So I double click the submit button and here I am. And I'm going to declare two variables. And Boolean result as Boolean. Remember, the Boolean data type is something where it makes this thing either true or false. I'm also going to create an OR Boolean result. And again, that's of the Boolean data type. So this is either going to be true or false. That's what a Boolean is. It's one or the other. Yes, question?
When I double click the submit button, it brought or above the global variables that we look.
So your cursor did not blink here when you double-clicked on the submit button?
It's right under the public class.
Do you have this where it says private sub btn submit underscore click?
Yeah.
Okay, so just move your cursor into there.
Okay.
Yeah, usually when you double click the submit button, it takes you to there, but I don't know, maybe you just accidentally click something else. You can just put your cursor back in here and start typing. Okay, so now that I have these two variables, let's AND state 1 and state 2. Right, let's AND these. So that means that the AND Boolean result is going to be switch 1 state, and I'll put the word AND switch 2 state. So as you saw on the board that I drew with the truth table for logical AND, this can be ANDed with this. If all of these are if one of these I should say is false, then the whole thing is false, because false and false is false, true and false is false, false and true is false. The only time that this is going to be a true result is if this is true and if this is true. True and true is true, so then this would be true if both of these are true. These are all Boolean operators. How about this? The OR Boolean result is going to be switch 1 state or switch 2 state. So I performed a logical operation to determine if I AND these two, if I OR these two, what are the results? Now the next thing that I want to do is I want to display those results here on this label. So I'll do this. LBL result dot text. Okay, I'm going to place something into here. Now here's the problem. See, I want to say like, okay, what's the state of switch 1? What's the state of switch 2? I cannot do this. What's the state of switch 1? I can't do that because this thing is a Boolean. You see the text that appears over here? It's a Boolean. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say dot to string. Open and close parentheses. So now what I've done is I've just introduced to you a way to change something like an integer or a double, or in this case a Boolean, to a string, because that's what you are assigning it into. You are assigning it into the text property of this label. Well, can't put a Boolean in there, can't put an integer in there, can't put a double. You have to change it to a string. Now, in Visual Basic, will it allow you to get rid of this? Yes. This is called implicit conversion. What you're doing here is explicitly converting it to a string. So Visual Basic is the only language that I know of that will do things like that for you. Here you want to develop a good habit of explicitly converting it to a string so you can put it into a text, which is synonymous to string. So what is the state of this string? I'm going to concatenate that with the word AND as a string. I'm going to concatenate that with switch 2 state to string. So switch 2 state to string. Now, do you notice how my text goes to the beginning of the next line? I have this thing in word wrap mode over here. That's because I went to Tools, Options, I typed in the word wrap over here, text editor, and then I activated this word wrap option. Yes?
Whenever I was doing the first lab and I was trying to do the AND part, it wouldn't work with me spelling out AND.
Yes.
When I switched it to the AND symbol, it started working.
Yeah, that's probably because you selected the wrong language. C++ uses the ampersand, but Visual Basic uses the word AND, as you see right here. Yeah, so it depends on the language that you select. Most languages like C++, Java, Swift, the new programming language for Apple, they use ampersand, ampersand. So instead of this, they would type in this. That means logical and. Visual Basic actually uses the word and. Now in other languages, instead of or, you use these two vertical lines to represent or. We call that the pipe, two pipes. But in Visual Basic, you have to use the word or. Okay, we're still not finished. This is still one line of text. Whatever this is going to say something like true, and then I have to do something like this. Concatenate that with an equal symbol. Concatenate that with whatever the and Boolean result is. Now I can press enter. I'm not finished, so I'm going to run the code and I'll let you see what the code is down here. Okay. So here's the code as you can see over here. True, and then switch to is true. Let's see what happens when I click submit. True and true equals true. That's correct. Let's see what happens if I change this to false. True and false equals false. That also is correct according to the truth table for and. How about this? Let's say that both of these are false. False and false equals false. That's correct. And then finally, I'll make this true. False and true equals true. Again, that is correct. So this works, but what I want underneath it is another line for the or operator. So how do I do that? What I'm going to have to do over here is I'm going to have to say, let's concatenate this with a VB new line. Now, just to remind you, VB new line means go to the beginning of the next line. Okay. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Test. Or how about this? Next line. You're not going to type this. I'm just giving you an example here. If I went to the beginning of the next line, this text should appear at the beginning of the next line. Let's see. Yep, see how it says next line? It's at the beginning of the next line. So VB new line does that for you. It takes you to the beginning of the next line. Well, what do you want to appear at the beginning of the next line? I want the same thing as this over here, but I want that to be the word or. So I think I'm just going to copy and paste. Copy all of this, and before it says and, I'm not going to use that. I'll just copy right up to here. Or you could type it out, that's fine. I'm going to change this to the word or equals, let me concatenate that with or Boolean result. So or Boolean result. Okay, I'm going to run the program. I'll let you see the code here. If I click submit, true and true equals true, true or true equals true. That's correct. How about if I change both of them to false and then I click submit? False and false equals false. False or true equals false. Correct. How about if I do something like this? Switch one is true, switch two is false. Submit. False and anything is always going to be false. True or anything is always going to be true. How about if I swap these around? Again, same results. False and true is false. False or true is true. All right, so our program works. This is going to calculate or determine based on what the user wants for the two switches. Do they want one switch to be true, one switch to be false? What is the and of those two? What is the or of those two? This program will now show you how that works out. And I was able to combine everything into one label. Okay, so we used the submit button to determine what the result is. Well, first of all, I don't want that. When I start the program, really, this thing should immediately display what the results are of switch 1 being true, switch 2 being true. I have to click submit right now to get an answer. Watch this. Click submit. Now it appears. I don't want that to be the case. This really should activate as soon as I open the program. So let me close this. And I'm going to introduce you to form load. If I double click this form, watch the procedure that it takes me to. So I double click, and it takes me to this thing called the load procedure. See, the load procedure does this. If there is something that you want to execute, do this first, and then display the form or load the form. So all of this is the first stuff to be done. For example, let's go to the track. We're going to run a lap around the track, see who wins. But before we get started, I better tie my shoes. I'm going to get a drink of water. I'm going to stretch out a little bit. Now I'm going to set. As soon as I hear the gun, go. So all that preparation had to take place before you start the race. That's what this is. This is all of the preparation that you get ready for, and then when all that stuff has been established, you run the program. So what do I want to be displayed on the screen? Well, really, when you think about it, I want everything that this submit button to be displayed. I want to be able to declare these variables. I want to be able to obtain the state of those variables, and then I want to display it to the label. So guess what I'm going to do? Copy and paste all this code that was in my BTN submit click event. I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to paste it to that form load event. So I'll go down over here, paste, Control V as in Victor. Watch what happens when I run the program. Do you see how immediately something was placed into here? Because this is doing the same thing as if I were clicking, but I don't want to have it click. I don't want to have to click this thing. I want to have it display as soon as I open the program. Okay, so that's the first criteria. The last thing that I want to show you is, let's say that as soon as I click this button, I want to see a change. Watch what happens. I'm going to click false. It didn't show me a change. I want to click false over here. It didn't show me a change. I don't want to have to click the submit button. As soon as I click one of these buttons over here, I should see an immediate change. Okay, so let me stop this and go back over here. All right, let's deal with this guy over here. Okay. So as soon as I click this, I want there to be a change. All right, well, what do I have to do in order to see some sort of a change? Well, first of all, I'm going to have to do exactly what I did over here for the submit button. I'm going to have to declare these two variables. So what I'm about to do is not the most elegant approach, but is the most simplest to understand approach. And then I'm going to change things around to make it more elegant. So what I really need to do is I need to create these two variables so that I can get the and the or result. I'm going to put it right here. What's the next thing that I need to do? I need to perform this calculation because this was checked, so I need to check what switch 1 and switch 2 are. Then, once I've done that, then I need to do this. So I'm going to select all of this, which will do what? It'll determine what the switch 1, switch 2 state are, and it'll place everything into that LBL result. So I'll copy under here, under the if statement, paste. So right now, it's as soon as I click this guy over here, this change is going to take place. Let's do the same thing for this switch or this radio button. When I click that one, again, I need a similar change. As soon as this changes, I want to update the label. Okay, well, in order for me to do that, I'm going to have to declare these two variables. So I'll just take these two, copy, paste, just before the if statement. I'm going to have to perform the and, the or, and also display the data onto that label. So I'll copy that, place that underneath the if statement. Let's see what happens when I run the code. All right, so first of all, it displayed the data. Perfect. I am not going to click submit. As soon as I click this, we should see a change down here. Let's watch. Yep, there it is. Watch what happens when I click this. It changes it back. See, that's the effect that I want. When I make a change to one of these radio buttons, immediately show the results over here. Now, can I still use the submit button? Sure, I can still use that. But you also want the capability of making changes immediately based on the radio button selection. Now, I haven't performed the code yet for these buttons, so that's why when I change these, nothing's going to happen. So let me go ahead and add the code for these two. All right, so similar to what I did before, I'm going to go over here, double click on this radio button. So now I have to start entering code into here. Let me just go up a little bit, and all I'm going to do is just simply copy the declaration, put that over here. After the if statement, I have to have this code right here where it performs the Boolean operation for and, the Boolean operation for or, and then it's going to display the results in this label. So after this if statement, enter, enter, paste. And then finally, I'll do the same thing for this button over here. I'll just take this code over here, declare these, place that right here, copy this code over here, which is going to do the and the or operation, so forth and so on. Place that right here. So now when I run the program, notice that no matter which button I click, automatically we're going to get an immediate update to this code. Yes, question?
So the green bar on the side, if it's lit like yellow, does that mean in that line that there's something wrong?
Yeah, well, if it's green, no, it just means it's unused.
No, if it's like yellow, does that mean something?
Some sort of an error, yeah. All right, look at this, guys. This is terrible. Here I've declared these. I've declared these. Same thing. Here's another declaration. All of these are local declarations. They are all local to a given procedure. This belongs to this. That's what I mean by local. That's a lot of repeating myself. Why don't I do this? Why don't I make this global? Why don't I put it out here? See, by making it global, then I don't have to repeat this over and over and over again for each procedure. So I'm going to copy and paste over here, and then let me just get rid of these. I don't need this over here. I don't need this over here. Same thing for all these procedures. I just created these two on the very top, so this is not necessary. Right? So over here, and or they exist globally, they exist outside of any procedure, so I don't need those. And the program will still work. So I'll run the program. And again, no matter which one of these I select, you'll immediately get the answer over here. All right? So this is Professor Robert Solis. I hope this video lesson was helpful. Have a good day. See you next time.